Welcome to EFT Nation, your home for all things tapping. For show notes and resources, please visit EFTtappingtraining.com. We are your tapping hosts. I'm Alina Frank.
And I'm Craig Wiener. The information provided in this podcast is not a substitute for counseling or medical advice. The information presented here is meant to inspire and educate listeners, but are not guarantees of any kind.
Well, today I really thought that we would bring to our audience something that I get asked all the time as a moderator for the large EFT EFT Emotional Freedom Techniques Facebook group. So if you're not there, it's the one with like 15,000 people. Yeah, it's the largest. And years ago, Facebook changed its algorithm. We had close to 30,000. Then they went back. It dropped to 15 after they created all these rules. But anyway, we are back, and it's a great group. It has all kinds of free guides that you can look through, and I think it's a great companion to this podcast. And of course, the best resource would be for you to take a training if you're interested in doing this with other people. So the question that gets asked privately and publicly in that group the most, which I have seen an actual increase in the last few years, and we'll talk about why that is this question of, does EFT help with social anxiety?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Apparently it's a problem out there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And
I don't think things like pandemics help.
Well, yeah, that's what we're going to get into. So first, let's come up with a definition so we all are on the same page about what it is.
Well, I just want to make the distinction between what could be called anxiety, social anxiety, and then moving over onto the other side of mental health diagnoses like generalized anxiety disorder,
right?
Social anxiety as a diagnosis, also called the social phobia, right? So in other words, you can be shy. You can be an introvert.
You can be uncomfortable.
You can be uncomfortable and stressed in different situations. That's really within a very normal category. And it's all normal. But when it gets to a more severe stage, when somebody's actually diagnosed with social anxiety disorder, it means that everyday interactions with other people cause irrational anxiety and fear and self-consciousness and embarrassment.
Right.
And you start to just can't let go of, you have these persistent thoughts of, are people judging me? Are people watching me? Worried about being embarrassed, and it takes over.
You're right. Yeah.
Right. And that social anxiety, the distinction that is opposed to like generalized anxiety is it's all about interactions with others.
Right.
Right. And crowds and meals and gatherings and parties and family. And it's the interaction with other people that is the trigger of all the physical and emotional and mental, chaos that results.
I think nowadays, don't you think that a lot of people, they self-diagnose? Like
all the time.
Things. Yeah, like I'm depressed. Well, did you actually go and get evaluated?
Yeah.
No. I just did something. I'm anxious. I have anxiety. Okay. So I have social anxiety. Right. Well,
they're like the little letters versus the capital letters, right? Like I'm anxious, but that doesn't mean that I've reached the level of a diagnosis of anxiety. I'm really sad and and I'm down and I'm just feeling I kind of hope I want to hide.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily qualify to the level of a diagnosis of depression.
So if you think that you might have it, it is worth going to a licensed mental health care professional and getting a diagnosis.
Properly evaluation and diagnosis and treatment options and all, including EFT. We're not excluding that just because you have a diagnosis.
Sure.
Because we have, studies that show EFT to be very effective for anxiety, depression. In fact, we have meta-analysis. For example, there was back in 2016, Klon did that evaluation where put together 14 studies of different types of anxiety that met the criteria. And there are over 650 people. And in that, they had randomized controlled trials that they looked at. There were everything from anxiety in children, adolescents, university students. And in fact, there have been randomized controlled studies published for measuring anxiety in, reducing nurse stress and anxiety during COVID. Studies on anxiety on women that are about to undergo surgery, public speaking anxiety, exam anxiety, adolescent, which would be more about social anxiety, social work student anxiety in adults in Australia and India. So we have, a lot of studies showing EFT to be statistically significantly effective against controls and wait lists and even some other types of interventions for being really effective with different flavors of anxiety.
Now, I want to ask you this question because I'm going to come at this from somebody that doesn't know a lot about what to look for in research.
Okay.
And I'm not a researcher. So would you say that a meta-analysis is like better than just a paper or just a one study? What is the definition of a meta-analysis, more or less? In layman's terms.
I mean, at the most basic foundation is somebody writing up a case study about something successful or, actually just exploring. I worked with this one client and here were the results.
Sure.
And it got published.
Right.
So a case study. As you work your way up, then you move towards, for example, at a much higher level of significance is a randomized control clinical trial.
And then peer-reviewed.
Right. So randomized control basically means we have a group that did this, and we had a group that didn't do this, and we divided them in half, and then we, with all the statistics, measure the differences between those two to see if the intervention that was used was of significance, right?
Right.
So those are the RCTs. And a meta-analysis.
And wait, can you just say the peer-reviewed? What is
peer-reviewed? Is just a kind of publication. In other words, if you sent me something you wrote up, but I put it on my blog.
Right.
It's not peer-reviewed. It's not fellow colleagues in the field that are reviewing it for errors, for mistakes, for things that were missed.
Analysis.
You still could supply a peer-reviewed journal, simply a journal that's a high enough standard.
But they're going to review that before they actually publish it.
Yes, that's what a peer-reviewed journal is.
Right. So then at the highest level
is a meta-analysis. And a meta-analysis is a study not of the situation, but a study of the studies measuring that thing.
Great.
So, in EFT, we have meta-analyses for anxiety.
Yeah. Great.
Because there are enough papers done for anxiety, for depression.
Great.
And for PTSD are the largest meta-analyses that we have, which are a review of the papers of the papers.
Right. So we need more papers.
Always. But that's another topic.
Right, for sure. So thanks for that. And so it is really, important to this conversation that we already have a meta-analysis for anxiety with EFT.
It is. And of course, different populations, different types of anxiety. Sometimes they measure it against just person doing nothing.
Right.
Right. And that's not as good as, let's say, measuring against something else that's well established, of which some has been done, but more needs to be done.
Yep.
But what I want to say also is the variety of not only the population that was measured, but also it varied. I mean, I think it was the one that was women undergoing anxiety before surgery. They had 3 10-minute EFT sessions. Right. And another one that was done, the one with the adults in India that was more general anxiety, they had 8 sessions over the course of a month.
Okay.
Right? So you see in these studies all kinds of variations of applications from 3 10 minutes to an hour session to a group session.
Right.
To a group session online, to one-on-one with a practitioner. So we see all these variations of applications of EFT and how they're being performed and still showing to be statistically significantly effective.
Sure. So whether you work with a licensed mental health care professional that is trained in EFT would be a really good thing if you are diagnosed. If you go and get a diagnosis first and work in conjunction with your licensed mental health care professional and an EFT practitioner where the lines are really clear about what it is that you're working on with each person, that's a really good strategy and something that I did for years with my EFT clients that had these problems. Because there's certainly a lot to work on using EFT. Now, could you work on some of this yourself? Absolutely. But there are things that we advise don't go where you shouldn't go. And that basically, if you really want a clear line, don't work on big T traumas by yourself. And so you go back to listen to the episode that we did on the distinction between big T and small t, and what you can do for yourself and what you really should see a professional for.
Yeah, and for those people that are listening that are not EFT trained, right? They're not in the field, and you're a person that's just heard about tapping, you found tapping, however you did online or somebody shared it to you. The best learning for you for using EFT is going to be not with all these things that are from your past and from your childhood. It's being able to use EFT as a resourcing tool in the moment to self-regulate yourself.
Yes, exactly.
Right? In other words, so with social anxiety, any scenario, I have to go to this family gathering.
Right.
And I'm just, it's 3 weeks away and I'm already starting to fret about it. It's starting to affect my sleep because I know that I'm going to have to get together and see my uncle so-and-so and my brother's going to be there. And the last time we talked, whatever. And they're going to judge me for not having been success. I'm going to have all those things in my head that's going to be whatever your flavor is going to be of embarrassed by, ashamed about, forecasting and worried future word about being judged, because that's really what anxiety is.
Yes.
Anxiety is a present felt sensation, emotion, thoughts, concerns about the future, about what I'm projecting may happen or will happen or that I know is going to happen in my mind.
So you can use EFT as a self-regulating tool for when you are in that environment. You could be tapping even just on the points. Like, let's say you just excuse yourself, go to the bathroom and tap on the points to bring that stress down and that anxiety that you're feeling down to a manageable level. I've had lots of people go in their car, go into the bathroom, go and excuse themselves and go and do some tapping on what they're feeling. But you can, as Craig said, you can go and construct tapping statements that have to do with your particular trigger. So for social anxiety, those triggers can be talking to someone, going to work, interactions with friends, going to a party, going shopping, going to the post office. So imagine you walking into those places, or even starting imagining from, I'm walking out my door, what do I feel? I'm going into my car, what do I feel? I arrive, what do I feel? And just imagine those, break those down into those tapping statements that will be the flavor for you of what it is that is upsetting you.
So if a person is coming here for the first time and they haven't yet listened to many of our other podcasts,
go back.
Go back and listen to those so that you can help to set up a setup statement of, even though I'm feeling really anxious or worried, right? I feel that in my chest, just thinking about going to the mall right now with everything that's happening, right? And I still accept that that's how I'm feeling, or I still accept myself, or deeply and completely accept myself.
You can
go through those rounds of tapping.
So you can go to our website, EFTtappingtraining.com, and pick up a free quick start guide that will have you tapping the way that we recommend that you tap, which is very effective and very specific. So let's talk about some of the other things that are, so we talked about the definition, and we talked about some of the triggers, which you can work on. And we know that there are common limiting beliefs that are associated with social anxiety, and I'm totally blanking on the name of the person. They were really involved instrumental in cognitive behavior therapy as it started and developed, and they came up with this list of the common limiting beliefs associated with social anxiety. So I'm not likable. I'm different. I'm going to say or do something stupid or embarrassing. Everyone can tell I have anxiety. I don't belong. I'm going to do something embarrassing.
So these are like, I might be just feeling the anxiety in my body.
Yes.
And I might be describing the emotion that I'm having, because the best way I have to describe it is anxious or nervous.
Sure.
Right?
Right.
So these are the more global cognitive thoughts, decisions, these limiting beliefs that I'm drawing conclusions from.
Yes.
From all these feelings and sensations and past history
Yes.
that are now defining how I'm interacting with the world and these
Yeah.
other people, and they're determining my actions and what I feel like I can and can't do.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the role that limiting beliefs play, which are huge.
And so we don't want you to make the mistake of thinking that you can tap on those statements and get rid of what you're feeling and really neutralize it or be very effective. And sadly, that's what most of those tapping scripts, tapping prompts, tapping apps, tapping videos do, is they tap on these global statements. And they don't work on the history, which will really get you some amazing relief, if not really have you feeling asymptomatic.
So the distinction again
Yeah.
is that one very, very useful tool when we talk about EFT as a self-help tool
Right?
is that you have to go to this family gathering.
Right?
And you can start working on, you don't have to wait till the morning of. You
No.
can start working. I know that next week
Yeah.
I can spend time just thinking about entering the door and seeing my brother,
Yes.
right? I'm feeling all
what's
this
gonna
anxiousness and what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I'm projecting forward to a specific example of how I'm showing up as I don't belong or whatever.
Exactly.
Right?
And these beliefs, we know that beliefs are really set in place much earlier on in life. So you can look to, oh, these are the contributing factors. These are the underlying root emotional contributing factors. And some of these you'll be able to work on by yourself. And some really do need the help of a guide, of a trauma-informed practitioner or licensed mental health care professional. So what are some of those contributing factors for social anxiety? Here's a good one. Too much social isolation. Gee, is it any surprise that there are studies now that are coming out about what has happened to us in the last few years? It's no surprise to me that I'm getting this question a lot more often than I ever did.
Right, because these are evergreen podcasts. We are still in the middle of the Delta variant of the COVID pandemic,
And
of
people
which
are locked down.
around the world are various degrees of isolation, social isolation,
Yep.
lockdown, can't travel,
Or
quarantine,
fearful of traveling.
fearful of traveling,
Or interacting with people.
Exactly. So is that a potential trigger for the
yeah.
feeling of social anxiety? Yeah, you betcha.
Yeah. A childhood with parents or guardians who were overprotective, controlling, restrictive, or anxious.
Sure. So I learned that having a highly controlled environment was the way it was supposed to be and safer. And then all of a sudden I get out in life and it's not so controlled and it feels threatening or dangerous or whatever my variation of feeling
Yes.
about that is.
And there is a genetic component to this. That if you had anxious parents, you have that sort of tendency, right? Sensitivity to that.
Right.
Traumatic bullying as a child. Emotional, physical, sexual, or verbal abuse.
Absolutely.
Parents not validating concerns or feelings about the anxiety, dismissing it as, oh, shy, oh, it's not that bad. Dismissing it actually contributes to it. Drugs. Okay. There are drugs that make you feel anxious and bring on social anxiety.
Sure.
Lack of face-to-face interactions. So not only do we have what's happening with around the world with the pandemic, but we also have more and more and more and more technology without face-to-face, in-person, live interactions with people.
Yeah. The co-regulation that happens in the realm of what we call interpersonal neurobiology, what that means is basically the neuroscience and the neurophysiology and how our body is responding conscious and unconsciously to being with another person can either be co-regulating, in other words, you're with somebody and they make you feel calm, or dysregulating because that person looks angry. And you know what's happening, and we're not going to go into polyvagal theory right now in the social engagement system, but what I want to say is one of the things that we're doing in helping prevent the spread of COVID is we're having various degree of face covering and masking.
Right.
And part of what happens in the co-regulation between human beings is the observation of a person's facial features and eyes and the tone of their mouth and the tone of their voice, which is being distorted. Please, I am a big supporter of using masks as a prevention for the spread of COVID. However, is it a potential trigger and or influence of less regulation by not seeing somebody's face between adults and especially with children?
Yeah.
These are very real situations and triggers that we're dealing with now.
Absolutely. Huge contributing factor. So of all of these, look, could you work on your too much isolation and your nervousness or concern to go out and connect with someone? Absolutely. Could you work on memories that you have of your parents being overprotective or anxious themselves? Absolutely. Traumatic bullying, could you work on yourself?
You could. It's just more vulnerable
Yes.
to not being, to getting overwhelmed and feeling so many feelings that you can't deal with, and having another person to co-regulate with you that's trained in helping to keep you feeling safe.
And I would say that if the bullying goes to physical in any way, shape, or form, boom, that puts it in the big T category.
Yeah,
right?
And I'd be working with a practitioner with that.
Exactly. Yeah. Sexual, physical abuse, absolutely. Yep. Verbal, could you do it? Sure, you could do that. Emotional, yeah, depends on the level. You could probably get some relief from that on your own. Your parents not validating your feelings about it, absolutely, you could work on that. If you are withdrawing from drugs that make you feel anxious, no, please seek the help of a professional that's going to look at that, maybe in conjunction with the doctor prescribing it and all of that. Lack of face-to-face interactions, absolutely. So it's a vicious cycle, right? You're nervous about going out, and then you're at home more, and then at home more causes you to feel more anxious when you do go back and reintegrate into society.
Yeah, and when we're in a state of anxiousness, right, we're not in a regulated state, we're not in a coherent state, so our heart isn't working perfectly and matched up, brainwaves and all of those things. What happens is we are under the experience of being stressed. And when we are being stressed, our prefrontal cortex is not having access and blood flow to the ability to go, you know what?
That's not such a big deal.
That actually is not that big a deal. And you know what? That really is very unlikely to happen. In fact, they're overseas right now. They're probably not going to be at the party anyway. And you know what? I could actually even make a call and find out if they're going to be there. So that kind of critical, rational thinking that will often really help us. Right. It's almost like it's beyond the screen, that when we're feeling the anxiousness, we can't think with that kind of clarity or come up with strategies that work. It's almost like they're feeling unavailable or inaccessible to us.
I'm looking over my notes and I see that I left out some really important contributing factors. So one is high ACEs, and if you have high ACEs, we recommend that you're working with
high what?
High ACEs, adverse childhood experiences.
If there was a lot of childhood trauma, which you did actually start to name some of.
And insecure attachment.
Okay.
Is a huge contributing factor, and we recommend that if you have insecure attachment, that it really is going to behoove you to have a licensed mental health care professional who's hopefully trained in EFT.
Yeah, we actually did a recent webinar with an attachment expert. If you go to tappingoutoftrauma.com, which is our trauma training website, and you go to the free webinars, there are all kinds of resources and free interviews there.
Yes.
The last one was with Diane Poole-Heller, and it was all about the role that attachment plays as we become adults. In other words, how secure, the relationship is between the primary caregiver, usually the mother, and the infant. Was that one that gave the experience to the child of feeling nurtured, of being able to teach them how to self-regulate or not? Right. And if that wasn't established early on, then there's all kinds of ways that it's expressed, anxiety being one of them, and the need to reach out and feel connected or worry that we're not going to get that connection and be nurtured and be held and safe.
Exactly. Another huge contributing factor for social anxiety is rejection by a community, family, any kind of group for your differences, including race, religion, appearance, gender
identity,
disability.
Absolutely.
So all of those can absolutely contribute to social anxiety. And last is having an experience with some kind of mental illness yourself.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And more.
Yeah. So I hope we've given you some hope, right? And shared with you the ability of how you can start to work with some of this yourself. But at the end of the day, if you are not getting the results that you are wanting, it really is going to be important for you to reach out. And maybe your social anxiety about reaching out to
Yes.
someone is someplace where you can absolutely start.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. In other words, if I'm anxious to even reach out, somebody will judge me for all this anxiety I'm feeling.
Sure.
Find some way to resource yourself and take whatever small step is easiest for you. Yeah. Thanks for joining us today at EFT Nation. And remember that you can find show notes and previous episodes at EFTtappingtraining.com.